The Sajama lines stretch across 22,000 square kilometers of Bolivia's high-altitude desert, forming what might be the world's largest artwork. These thousands of perfectly straight pathways were carved into the earth over 3,000 years, yet most people have never heard of them. Unlike their famous cousins, the Nazca lines, the Sajama network doesn't depict animals or geometric shapes. Instead, it creates an intricate web of razor-straight trails that maintain their precision across 20-kilometer stretches, despite crossing some of the most rugged terrain in South America. The lines average 1 to 3 meters wide and were created by scraping away the dark oxidized surface rocks to expose lighter soil beneath. What makes these lines truly extraordinary is their scale. If placed end to end, they would stretch 16,000 kilometers, roughly 3 times the width of the United States. The network covers an area 15 times larger than the Nazca lines, yet receives a fraction of the attention or research funding. The lines radiate outward from elevated central points scattered across the Bolivian altiplano. These radial centers often contain ancient shrines called huacas, burial towers known as cholpas, and remnants of small settlements. Many researchers believe the pathways served as sacred pilgrimage routes, guiding indigenous travelers between these spiritual sites. The Carangas people, who inhabited this region between 1000 and 1476 CE, are the most likely creators. However, the lines continued to be used and modified well into the colonial period, suggesting their importance transcended individual cultures. Some theorists propose a connection between the Sajama and Nazca line networks, pointing to similar construction techniques and their proximity within 800 kilometers of each other. Both were created using identical methods of surface scraping, and both cultures possessed astronomical knowledge that could explain the precise alignments found in many of the pathways. The lines weren't properly documented in English until 1932, when Argentine professor Aimé Félix Chifoli briefly mentioned them during his famous horseback journey from Argentina to New York City. Even today, comprehensive photographs of the network remain scarce, with most documentation coming from satellite imagery rather than ground-level exploration. What's particularly intriguing is how these massive earthworks remained virtually invisible from ground level, only revealing their true scope when viewed from above. This raises questions about the technological capabilities and planning methods of their creators, who somehow coordinated this continental-scale project without modern surveying equipment. Symantec Pfits.exe is one of the most fascinating cases where a simple software glitch transformed into a full-blown conspiracy theory that gripped the internet in March 2009. Norton antivirus users worldwide began receiving alarming firewall alerts. An unknown program called Pfits was attempting to connect to the internet from their computers. The file appeared to be stored in a subdirectory that didn't actually exist within the Symantec Live Update folder. This behavior matched the signature of rootkit malware. When concerned users flocked to Norton's official forums seeking answers, something strange happened. Their posts vanished without explanation. Discussion threads about PIFs were being systematically deleted, sometimes within minutes of being posted. This heavy-handed censorship only fueled suspicions that something sinister was at work. The file was attempting to contact stats.norton.com, allegedly transmitting data from users' personal computers to Symantec servers. Analysis revealed that Pfits was accessing internet history files, temporary folders, and interfacing with Google desktop search components before attempting to connect to external servers. Wild theories began circulating across social media platforms, forums, and security blogs. Some claimed the program was government-sponsored spyware, allowing federal agencies to monitor American citizens. Others suggested it was a backdoor installed at the request of law enforcement agencies. The timing seemed suspicious to many, as this occurred during heightened concerns about domestic surveillance programs. What made the situation more intriguing was the discovery that the servers Pfits was trying to contact were traced to companies with connections to military intelligence operations. The Web Data Group, based in Arlington, Virginia, had publicly stated their involvement in military intelligence information gathering on their website. Symantec's response only deepened the mystery. Company representatives initially provided vague explanations, and the systematic deletion of forum discussions created an information vacuum that conspiracy theories rushed to fill. Even when security researchers submitted the file to virus scanning services, no antivirus vendor flagged it as malicious, adding another layer of suspicion. The controversy reached such intensity that malware creators began capitalizing on the situation. They poisoned search engine results, directing people searching for PIF's information to malicious websites designed to infect their computers. Eventually, Symantec released an official statement claiming PIFs stood for Product Information Framework Troubleshooter. They explained it was designed to gather diagnostic information about their software to help resolve live update issues some customers were experiencing. The company maintained that forum posts were deleted due to spam abuse, not censorship. Despite the official explanation, many users remained skeptical. The damage to trust had already been done, and the incident became a cautionary tale about corporate transparency and the speed at which conspiracy theories can spread in the digital age. Astral America refers to the belief that the United States exists simultaneously on both physical and astral planes, with the astral version containing hidden knowledge and alternate historical events that shape our reality. According to this theory, remote viewers and astral projectors have discovered an overlay of America that exists in the astral realm. This ethereal version supposedly contains structures, landmarks, and even entire cities that never manifested in our physical world. The most frequently cited example is what believers call New Lemuria, described as a massive crystal city located where the Great Lakes currently sit. The theory gained traction in the 1970s when several independent astral projectors claimed to have visited identical locations during out-of-body experiences. Robert Monroe, founder of the Monroe Institute, allegedly documented over 200 astral journeys to what he termed the American Etheric Double between 1971 and 1978. Supporters point to specific geographical anomalies as evidence. The Bermuda Triangle, they claim, represents a thin point between the physical and astral Americas, where the two realities occasionally bleed through. This explains the mysterious disappearances and time distortions reported in the area. The conspiracy extends to suggest that certain government facilities were built on locations where the astral and physical Americas align most closely. NORAD's Cheyenne Mountain Complex and Area 51 supposedly serve dual purposes as both military installations and anchor points for maintaining the separation between dimensions. Some believers theorize that Native American sacred sites mark natural convergence points between the two Americas. The theory suggests that indigenous peoples possessed knowledge of astral travel and used these locations to access the alternate version of their homeland for spiritual guidance and prophecy. The most extreme version claims that key historical events actually occurred in Astral America first, then manifested in physical reality weeks or months later. CIA Lost China refers to one of the most devastating intelligence failures in modern American espionage history that unfolded between 2010 and 2012. During this period, the Chinese government systematically identified and eliminated virtually the entire CIA spy network operating within their borders. What makes this particularly striking is the speed and precision with which it happened. Sources that had been feeding intelligence to the United States for years suddenly went silent, one after another. The official story points to a compromised communication system that allowed Chinese counterintelligence to track down American assets. But the conspiracy theory suggests something far more disturbing, that a high-level mole within the CIA deliberately handed over the entire network to Beijing. Between 12 to 20 CIA sources were either executed or imprisoned during this purge. These weren't low-level informants, but carefully cultivated assets who had provided crucial intelligence on Chinese military capabilities, economic policies, and political developments for decades. The timing raises additional questions among conspiracy theorists. This occurred during a period when China was rapidly expanding its military presence in the South China Sea and developing advanced cyber warfare capabilities. Some suggest the intelligence loss wasn't accidental, but part of a broader strategy to blind American intelligence agencies during a critical period of Chinese expansion. What makes this theory particularly compelling is the complete breakdown in American intelligence gathering that followed. Former CIA officials have described it as going from having excellent insight into Chinese government decisions to operating almost completely in the dark practically overnight. The official investigation never definitively identified whether the breach came from a human source, compromised technology, or Chinese counterintelligence breakthrough. This uncertainty has fueled speculation that the true cause remains classified to protect ongoing operations or to avoid revealing the extent of the damage to American intelligence capabilities in the region. The MacDougall experiments represent one of the most unusual attempts to scientifically prove the existence of the human soul. In 1907, Dr. Duncan MacDougall, a physician from Haverhill, Massachusetts, set out to answer a question that had plagued humanity for centuries: does the soul have physical weight? MacDougall's methodology was surprisingly straightforward. He constructed a specially designed bed placed on an industrial scale sensitive to 0.2 of an ounce. His plan was to measure dying patients at the exact moment of death to detect any sudden weight loss that could be attributed to the soul departing the body. Over several months, MacDougall conducted his experiments on 6 terminally ill patients. He monitored their weight continuously as they lay dying, waiting for the precise moment when life left their bodies. The results varied dramatically from patient to patient. Some showed no weight change at all, others lost weight gradually, and one patient actually gained weight after death. However, one particular case stood out. MacDougall recorded a sudden weight loss of 3/4 of an ounce, which equals exactly 21 grams at the moment of death. This single measurement became the foundation for his famous claim that the human soul weighs 21 grams. MacDougall also conducted similar experiments on 15 dogs, finding no weight loss upon death. He used this as supporting evidence, arguing that animals lack souls and therefore wouldn't experience the same phenomenon. The scientific community immediately criticized MacDougall's work for numerous methodological flaws. His sample size was impossibly small, his equipment wasn't precise enough for such measurements, and he failed to account for natural biological processes that occur at death, such as the release of bodily fluids and changes in lung capacity. Despite these glaring issues, the 21 grams figure captured public imagination and has persisted in popular culture for over a century. It inspired books, movies, and countless discussions about the physical nature of consciousness and the soul. What makes this conspiracy theory particularly intriguing is that MacDougall genuinely believed he was conducting legitimate scientific research, yet his conclusions were based on essentially one questionable data point from a flawed experiment. The Machian principle challenges everything we think we know about motion and gravity. This hypothesis, named after physicist Ernst Mach, suggests that the inertia of every object in the universe is actually determined by all the other matter that exists. Think about it this way: when you feel pushed back in your seat as a car accelerates, that sensation isn't just happening in isolation. According to this principle, distant galaxies billions of light years away are somehow influencing that very experience. The concept emerged in the late 1800s when Mach questioned Newton's absolute space. He argued that there's no such thing as absolute motion or rest. Instead, everything is relative to the distribution of mass throughout the entire cosmos. Here's where it gets strange. The principle implies that if you were alone in an empty universe with no other matter anywhere, you wouldn't experience inertia at all. Spin a bucket of water in complete isolation, and the water wouldn't climb up the sides like it does in our universe. Einstein was fascinated by this idea and tried to incorporate it into his theory of general relativity. He believed that local physics should be determined by the global structure of the universe. However, he ultimately couldn't make it work mathematically in the way Mach envisioned. Modern physicists still debate whether the principle holds true. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics and cosmology seem to support aspects of it, while others suggest it's fundamentally flawed. The most unsettling implication is that every particle in your body is somehow connected to and influenced by matter at the very edge of the observable universe. A cosmic web of influence that operates through mechanisms we still don't fully understand. The Mars effect claims that the planet Mars holds a measurable influence over human athletic ability and aggressive personality traits. French psychologist Michel Gauquelin spent decades in the mid-20th century analyzing the birth charts of thousands of successful athletes and military leaders. Gauquelin discovered what appeared to be a striking pattern. Top athletes were significantly more likely to be born when Mars occupied specific positions in the sky, particularly just after rising or reaching its highest point. The effect seemed strongest among champion sports figures who excelled in physically demanding competitions. His research involved over 25,000 birth records spanning multiple countries and decades. Gauquelin found that roughly 22% of elite athletes were born during these key Mars positions, compared to only 17% expected by random chance. The difference might seem small, but statistically it suggested something beyond coincidence. The controversy deepened when multiple replication attempts produced conflicting results. Some studies supported Gauquelin's findings while others found no correlation whatsoever. The Committee for Skeptical Inquiry conducted their own analysis and initially appeared to confirm the effect, only to later dispute their own conclusions. What made this particularly unsettling for mainstream science was that Gauquelin used rigorous statistical methods typically reserved for legitimate research. He wasn't making vague astrological predictions, but presenting hard data that seemed to validate planetary influence on human behavior. The Mars effect remains one of the most documented yet disputed claims bridging astronomy and human psychology. Gauquelin's original data continues to circulate among researchers who believe conventional science has overlooked a fundamental connection between celestial mechanics and terrestrial biology. Manichean narrative describes the underlying structure that drives countless conspiracy theories. The idea that all world events can be explained through a simple battle between absolute good and absolute evil. This concept takes its name from Manichaeism, a 3rd century religion founded by a Persian prophet named Mani. The faith taught that existence itself was locked in an eternal cosmic war between forces of light and darkness, with no gray areas or middle ground possible. Modern conspiracy theories follow this exact same template. Complex geopolitical situations get reduced to storylines where shadowy villains pull strings behind every major event, while innocent populations remain trapped in their schemes. There's never any nuance, competing interests, or simple human error, just pure good fighting pure evil. The 2010s saw this framework explode across social media platforms. Political movements began casting their opponents not as people with different ideas, but as literal agents of darkness working to destroy civilization. Every policy disagreement became evidence of a grand conspiracy. Every compromise became proof of corruption. Researchers like political scientist Nancy Rosenblum have documented how this binary thinking reshapes entire worldviews. Once someone adopts a Manichean perspective, they start interpreting contradictory evidence as proof the conspiracy goes even deeper than they thought. The pattern shows up everywhere, from QAnon narratives about child trafficking rings to theories about global financial manipulation. Complex systems involving thousands of competing actors get simplified into stories about a handful of puppet masters orchestrating everything from wars to economic crashes. What makes this particularly powerful is how it satisfies the human need for clear moral categories while explaining away the frustrating complexity of real life. Instead of wrestling with difficult questions about poverty, inequality, or international relations, everything gets sorted into heroes and villains. The skeleton on the moon theory centers on alleged photographic evidence of skeletal remains visible in NASA lunar mission imagery. Believers point to specific photographs from the Apollo missions, particularly images taken during surface operations, where they claim to identify what appears to be a humanoid ribcage, spine, or complete skeletal structure partially buried in lunar regolith. The most frequently cited evidence comes from Apollo 20, though this mission was officially canceled in 1970. Conspiracy theorists argue the mission actually took place in secret, and astronauts discovered not just skeletal remains, but an entire ancient lunar civilization. According to these claims, the bones measure approximately 3 to 4 meters in length, suggesting they belong to beings significantly larger than humans. Some versions of the theory propose these are the remains of ancient giants who once inhabited the moon, while others suggest they're evidence of prehistoric space travel. William Rutledge, who claimed to be a former NASA astronaut, released footage in 2007 showing what he described as alien structures and mummified remains on the moon's far side. The footage shows close-up shots of what appears to be a female humanoid face with elongated features, which believers connect to the skeletal discoveries. The theory gained momentum when digital image enhancement techniques were applied to existing NASA photographs. Enthusiasts use these methods to highlight shadows and rock formations that they interpret as fossilized bone structures. NASA dismisses these claims as examples of pareidolia, the psychological phenomenon where people perceive familiar shapes in random patterns. Scientists explain that the moon's harsh environment, with temperature extremes ranging from negative 173 degrees Celsius to 127 degrees Celsius, would not preserve organic material in the manner these theories suggest. Despite official denials, supporters argue that space agencies deliberately obscure or edit lunar photographs to hide evidence of ancient lunar inhabitants, claiming that humanity's understanding of solar system history has been deliberately suppressed. This theory claims that Dealy Plaza in Dallas was deliberately designed as a hidden Masonic temple, with Kennedy's assassination serving as a ritualistic sacrifice performed on sacred ground. The plaza's layout forms what theorists describe as a truncated pyramid when viewed from above. The triple underpass creates 3 arches, which some interpret as representing the 3 pillars of masonry. The grassy knoll sits at a precise 33-degree angle from the Texas School Book Depository, and 33 holds special significance in Scottish Rite Masonry as the highest degree. George Bannerman Dealy, the plaza's namesake, was a prominent Dallas newspaper publisher in the early 1900s. Theorists point out that many civic leaders of his era held Masonic memberships, though direct evidence of Dealy's involvement remains elusive. The plaza's dedication occurred in 1935, with ceremonies that some claim followed Masonic cornerstone-laying traditions. The Stemmons Freeway sign, positioned directly in the motorcade's path, creates what theorists call a sightline interruption at the exact moment of impact. They argue this placement was intentional, designed to obscure witness views during the crucial seconds. The plaza's 3-street convergence forms what Masons call a point within a circle, symbolizing the individual Mason surrounded by the Brotherhood. Several researchers have noted that the plaza sits on what was once a Native American trading ground, adding another layer to claims about the location's ceremonial significance. The eternal flame at Kennedy's Arlington burial site mirrors similar flames found at Masonic lodges, creating what some see as bookends to a ritualistic process. The exact positioning of Elm Street's curve places the presidential limousine in what theorists describe as a killing zone, perfectly aligned with Masonic geometric principles. Even the time of day, 11:30 in the morning, gets scrutinized for its potential symbolic meaning in Masonic numerology. U.S. bovine poisoning in Iraq centers on claims that American military operations deliberately contaminated Iraqi livestock through toxic weapons and environmental negligence. The theory draws heavily from documented use of depleted uranium munitions, with the International Atomic Energy Agency estimating that between 170 and 1,700 tons of depleted uranium was dropped in Iraq by the U.S. military since 2003. When depleted uranium munitions detonate, they release particles of toxic substances into the environment, and in the 2003 Iraq conflict alone, over 1,000 tons of depleted uranium munitions were used mostly in cities. Believers argue this contamination deliberately targeted Iraq's agricultural foundation, poisoning cattle herds to weaken the country's food security and economy. The conspiracy gains traction from historical precedent. In 1971, mercury-treated grain shipped from the United States and Mexico to Iraq caused mass poisoning when farmers consumed it as food rather than planting it, resulting in over 6,500 hospitalizations and 459 official deaths. While this involved grain rather than livestock, theorists cite it as evidence of America's willingness to export toxic materials to Iraq. Supporters point to reports from Iraqi doctors documenting sharp rises in birth defects, cancer cases, and immune system collapse throughout Iraq, with contamination suspected in air, soil, and water from chemical weapons and depleted uranium. They argue these same contaminants entered the food chain through poisoned livestock, creating a deliberate cycle of population control. Research has found children living near U.S. bases in Iraq had roughly 28 times more thorium, a radioactive byproduct of depleted uranium, in their baby teeth compared to children living farther away. The theory extends this to suggest cattle grazing near contaminated military sites became vectors for widespread heavy metal poisoning. Theorists emphasize that the United States, United Kingdom, Israel, and France all opposed a 2001 United Nations resolution to document depleted uranium in war, and that the International Atomic Energy Agency prohibited Iraq from accessing equipment to monitor depleted uranium's impact on its population. This suppression of monitoring, they claim, was designed to hide evidence of systematic livestock contamination. The conspiracy suggests that beyond direct weapons contamination, U.S. military bases routinely detonated explosives, stored radioactive compounds and uranium-containing ammunition, and used burn pits to dispose of explosives, batteries, electronics, and plastics, all creating toxic runoff that deliberately poisoned grazing areas and water sources used by Iraqi cattle. While scientific studies show mixed results on depleted uranium's health effects, believers maintain that the scale of environmental contamination, combined with restricted access to monitoring equipment and suppressed research, indicates intentional agricultural warfare designed to cripple Iraq's rural economy and food independence for generations. Masonic doomsday represents the belief that Freemasons are actively orchestrating or preparing for a planned apocalyptic event that will reshape global civilization. This theory centers on the interpretation of Masonic symbols, rituals, and historical documents as blueprints for engineered catastrophe. Believers point to the prevalence of Masonic imagery on currency, government buildings, and corporate logos as evidence of a coordinated timeline leading towards societal collapse. The conspiracy focuses heavily on the Masonic concept of order out of chaos, a phrase that appears in various Masonic writings. Theorists claim this represents a deliberate strategy to create global turmoil before establishing a new form of governance. They interpret natural disasters, economic crashes, and political upheavals as manufactured events designed to weaken existing power structures. Specific attention gets paid to prominent Freemasons in positions of authority throughout history. The theory suggests these individuals have used their influence to position resources and infrastructure for post-collapse scenarios. Some versions claim underground bunker networks and supply chains have been established using Masonic lodge connections across different countries. The 2010s saw increased focus on Masonic involvement in technology companies and financial institutions. Theorists argue that digital currencies, surveillance systems, and social media platforms represent tools for controlling populations during the transition period following their planned doomsday event. Proponents of this theory often cite the Georgia Guidestones as a Masonic monument outlining population reduction goals, though the actual connection to Freemasonry remains disputed. They also point to recurring numerical patterns in dates of major events, claiming these align with Masonic calendars and ceremonial timing. The theory suggests that only select individuals within Masonic hierarchies possess knowledge of the complete timeline, while lower-ranking members remain unaware of the ultimate objectives. Asemic writing appears to be text or script that carries no readable meaning, resembling language while remaining completely indecipherable. At first glance, this artistic practice seems harmless enough, but deeper investigation reveals connections to unexplained phenomena and potential hidden communications. The term itself comes from the Greek word meaning "without meaning," yet numerous researchers have documented cases where Asemic writing allegedly produced coherent messages through unknown mechanisms. These instances often occur during altered states of consciousness, automatic writing sessions, or what some describe as channeling experiences. Throughout the 1900s and into the 2010s, investigators collected thousands of samples from individuals claiming no conscious control over their hand movements while producing these script-like markings. The resulting documents display consistent letter forms and spacing patterns that mirror natural languages, despite containing no translatable content. Several notable cases stand out from the archives. Helen Smith, a medium from Switzerland, produced extensive Asemic texts during seances in the 1890s that followers claimed contained communications from Martian beings. The Voynich manuscript, while potentially containing encoded information, exhibits characteristics that some researchers classify as advanced Asemic writing. More recently, participants in sleep studies have awakened to find Asemic texts written in their own handwriting with no memory of creating them. These samples often share structural similarities with known ancient scripts, suggesting either cryptomnesia or access to collective unconscious language patterns. Intelligence communities have reportedly studied Asemic writing as a potential steganographic method, where meaningless-looking text conceals actual coded messages. The practice allows for hidden communication that appears as artistic expression or psychological phenomena rather than deliberate information transfer. Some theorists propose that certain Asemic writing serves as a form of non-human communication, pointing to the mathematical precision found in letter spacing and recurring symbolic elements across unrelated samples from different continents and time periods. The Luminous Woman of Pirano centers around Anna Monaro, a 42-year-old woman from the Italian coastal town of Pirano in 1934. Anna suffered from severe asthma, and when her condition worsened that year, her fisherman husband noticed something extraordinary during her sleep. A brilliant blue light would emanate from her chest and torso, pulsing for several seconds at a time. Word spread quickly through the small port town, and soon doctors arrived to investigate this unprecedented phenomenon. Dr. Giocondo Prati, an Italian physicist, took charge of the case and conducted extensive observations. What he documented was far beyond simple medical curiosity. The blue glow appeared most prominently when Anna was in her deepest sleep, often during the worst of her asthma attacks. During these episodes, her heart rate would double and her breathing would become labored. Witnesses described the light as bright enough to illuminate her nightgown and the area around her bed. After each glowing episode, Anna would wake exhausted, sweating profusely, and groaning from apparent discomfort. Between March 9th and 19th, Anna shared a hospital ward with 7 other women, all of whom witnessed the phenomenon and reported it to medical staff. Dr. Prati attempted to capture evidence using the most advanced technology available at the time. He managed to film 54 frames of the occurrence, though only 3 seconds of footage actually showed the mysterious light. The scientific community proposed various explanations. One psychiatrist suggested that electrical and magnetic microorganisms had developed unusually strong concentrations in Anna's body. Another theory focused on elevated sulfide levels in her blood, combined with a unique form of ultraviolet radiation that had never been documented before. Dr. Prati himself believed Anna's poor health, combined with her religious fasting and devotion, had somehow altered her blood chemistry. The case gained international attention when major newspapers, including the Times of London, published reports about the Luminous Woman. A professor from Leningrad even expressed interest in studying Anna for potential cancer research applications, though the connection remained unclear. Anna herself added a mystical dimension to the mystery. She reported having prophetic dreams and claimed to see herself as a saint surrounded by divine light. Her small frame, perpetually dressed in black, and her reputation for deep religiosity only added to the supernatural speculation surrounding her condition. Modern science has since discovered that all humans emit extremely weak bioluminescence, roughly 1,000 times fainter than what the naked eye can detect. This natural phenomenon results from biochemical reactions within our cells, similar to the processes that make fireflies glow. Japanese researchers have even photographed this faint human light using ultra-sensitive cameras. Anna's case represents one of the most thoroughly documented instances of visible human bioluminescence in medical history. When she finally recovered from her severe asthma attacks, the glowing ceased completely and never returned. Dr. Prati's husband declined an offer to bring Anna to America for further study, and she returned to her quiet life by the sea. The mystery remains unsolved. Whether Anna Monaro experienced an extreme amplification of natural human bioluminescence or something else entirely, her case continues to intrigue researchers studying the boundaries between documented science and unexplained phenomena. The Arianni is said to be one of the more elaborate underground civilization theories, describing an advanced race allegedly living beneath the Earth's surface. These beings supposedly possess technology far beyond our current capabilities and have been watching surface dwellers for thousands of years. The theory gained serious momentum through supposed encounters during the 1940s and 1950s. Witnesses described the Arianni as tall, ethereal figures with pale skin and unnaturally large eyes. They allegedly live in vast subterranean cities illuminated by some unknown energy source, connected through massive cavern systems spanning thousands of kilometers beneath our feet. Admiral Richard Byrd's Antarctic expeditions frequently appear in these accounts. Believers claim Byrd encountered Arianni representatives during his polar flights, pointing to his alleged diary entries describing a hollow region beyond the South Pole. These entries supposedly detail advanced beings who expressed genuine concern about humanity's development of nuclear weapons. The Arianni allegedly communicate exclusively through telepathy and have mastered what believers call vril energy. This mysterious life force supposedly powers their entire civilization and extends their lifespans to several centuries. Their flying craft emerge from polar openings and account for many unidentified flying object sightings throughout the 20th century. Some versions suggest the Arianni originated from another planet entirely, establishing their underground civilization thousands of years ago. They maintain strict non-interference policies with surface humanity, though they occasionally make contact with carefully selected individuals. These contacts allegedly involve sharing warnings about environmental destruction and the dangers of nuclear warfare. The most dedicated believers insist that government agencies have actively suppressed evidence of Arianni contact. This supposed cover-up explains why mainstream science dismisses hollow Earth theories despite what they consider overwhelming testimonial evidence from multiple independent sources. U.S. biowar materials in Iraq refers to allegations that American forces maintained secret biological warfare programs and stockpiles within Iraqi territory during the occupation period. This theory centers on claims that the United States established covert biological research facilities across Iraq following the 2003 invasion, ostensibly under the guise of medical research or disease prevention programs. These facilities allegedly housed dangerous pathogens including anthrax, smallpox variants, and genetically modified organisms designed for military applications. The conspiracy gained traction following reports of unusual disease outbreaks in areas surrounding suspected American research sites. Between 2004 and 2008, Iraqi civilians in cities like Fallujah and Basra reported abnormally high rates of birth defects and cancer clusters that some attributed to exposure to experimental biological agents. Documents leaked in the 2010s purportedly showed communication between Pentagon officials and private contractors regarding the transport of biological materials to Iraqi facilities. These papers reference something called Project Green Light, which allegedly involved testing weaponized pathogens on local populations under the cover of humanitarian medical programs. The theory points to the presence of Level 4 biosafety laboratories that appeared in Iraq during the occupation, facilities capable of handling the most dangerous biological agents known to science. Official records claim these labs were built to study and contain naturally occurring diseases, but believers argue the real purpose was developing biological weapons that could be deployed without leaving clear evidence of their origin. Several Iraqi scientists who worked at these facilities reportedly died under mysterious circumstances between 2005 and 2009, fueling speculation that they were eliminated to prevent disclosure of the programs. The biological warfare materials allegedly included modified versions of common Middle Eastern diseases, engineered to be more virulent or resistant to standard treatments, allowing for plausible deniability if outbreaks occurred. Spider Rock Gold Maps refers to 3 mysterious stone tablets discovered across West Texas in the early 1900s that conspiracy theorists believe contain encoded directions to massive Spanish treasure hoards. Between 1902 and 1910, a portly treasure hunter named Dave M. Arnold unearthed these cryptic stone maps in 3 separate Texas counties. The first emerged from the confluence of the Salt Fork and Double Mountain Fork of the Brazos River near Aspermont. Arnold had followed what he claimed was an old sheepskin map, guided by 2 Hispanic men, including one known only as the Peg-Legged Mexican and another called Fernandez. Each stone tablet measured roughly 16 inches square and 2 inches thick, carved with an intricate spiderweb design that gave them their name. The maps display a bewildering combination of Roman numerals, Arabic numbers, ancient Spanish letters, and geometric symbols that remain completely undeciphered over a century later. What makes these discoveries particularly compelling is the physical evidence Arnold found alongside each stone. Near the first tablet, searchers uncovered Spanish silver epaulets, an ornate silver crucifix, a Spanish sword, and copper plates bearing mysterious markings. The second stone was literally imprisoned in the root system of a massive oak tree, requiring axes to extract. The locations where Arnold found these 3 stones form what researchers describe as a nearly perfect isosceles triangle across Fisher, Stonewall, and Callahan counties. This geometric precision suggests deliberate placement rather than random burial sites. According to the conspiracy theory, Spanish conquistadors traveling north with gold from Mexico encountered hostile Native American tribes in the early 1700s. Unable to continue with their heavy treasure, they buried it in a series of underground chambers and created these stone maps as a recovery system. The rectangular symbols supposedly represent an underground labyrinth with specific markings indicating water sources at 29 feet depth and designating only one passable entrance. Arnold's decade-long quest ended abruptly when he vanished without a trace in 1914. Searches resumed in the 1920s and intensified during the Great Depression when desperate fortune seekers used bulldozers and heavy earth-moving equipment to excavate suspected cache sites. The original artifacts were supposedly destroyed in a 1909 fire at Dr. Caleb Terrell's drugstore in Haskell, Texas. However, the Terrell family secretly preserved many items for nearly 70 years, including map tracings, correspondence, and several copper artifacts. The third stone map spent over 50 years as a doorstop in Waco before being recognized. Modern treasure hunters have employed ground-penetrating radar, metal detectors, and sophisticated surveying equipment, yet the supposed treasure remains hidden. Some researchers claim that crude smelter pits discovered in the 1930s prove Spanish mining operations existed in the area, lending credibility to the burial theory. The conspiracy extends beyond simple treasure hunting. Some theorists suggest the maps contain astronomical alignments, or that the symbols reference lost Spanish mines rather than buried gold caches. Others propose connections to the Knights of the Golden Circle, though the Spanish origin appears more historically supported. What makes Spider Rock particularly intriguing is that unlike many treasure legends, these maps represent physical artifacts with documented discovery histories and surviving witnesses who observed the excavations firsthand. Silent City, Alaska refers to a mysterious aerial phenomenon that has captivated witnesses for over a century. This apparition manifests as what appears to be an enormous city floating in the sky above the Alaskan wilderness, complete with buildings, towers, and structures that seem impossibly detailed and realistic. The most documented sighting occurred in 1937 when a group of prospectors near Mount McKinley reported observing a massive city suspended in the air for several hours. They described seeing what looked like skyscrapers, streets, and even moving figures within the structures. The vision was so clear and persistent that multiple witnesses sketched identical details of the buildings they observed. What makes Silent City particularly intriguing is the consistency of reports across different decades. Witnesses from the 1920s through the 1960s described remarkably similar architectural features in their aerial city. Many reported seeing Art Deco-style buildings that resembled major metropolitan areas from the continental United States, leading some to theorize they were witnessing projections of real cities from thousands of kilometers away. The scientific explanation centers on superior mirages created by temperature inversions in the Arctic atmosphere. When layers of air at different temperatures create a natural lens effect, distant objects can appear magnified and suspended in the sky. However, this explanation struggles to account for the incredible detail witnesses report and the apparent movement within the structures. Some researchers have proposed that Silent City represents glimpses of parallel dimensions or alternate realities bleeding through atmospheric distortions. Others suggest the phenomenon involves advanced military experiments with atmospheric projection technology, possibly connected to early radar and communication research conducted in Alaska during World War II. The mystery deepened when photographers in the 1950s captured images that appeared to show the aerial city, though skeptics argue these photos show nothing more than cloud formations and atmospheric distortion. What sets Silent City apart from typical mirage sightings is the urban specificity of what people observe and the fact that no earthly city matches the architectural layout consistently described by witnesses across multiple generations. Multiple moons refers to the theory that Earth either currently has or once possessed more than one natural satellite orbiting our planet. The most striking evidence comes from ancient artwork and texts that appear to depict multiple lunar bodies in the night sky. Cave paintings in locations across Europe and Asia show what look like 2 or 3 circular objects above horizon lines, while Sumerian tablets contain references to additional celestial companions alongside our familiar moon. Modern proponents point to captured asteroids that temporarily orbit Earth for months or years before breaking free. These mini-moons, typically measuring 1 to 10 meters across, follow elliptical paths that occasionally bring them close enough to be visible with telescopes. Asteroid 2006 RH-120 spent 11 months as Earth's second moon in 2006 and 2007, though mainstream astronomy dismisses these as temporary captures rather than permanent satellites. More controversial claims suggest that our current moon is actually one of several that survived an ancient planetary collision. Computer simulations show that the impact event believed to have created our moon could have produced multiple large fragments, not just one. These additional moons would have either crashed back to Earth or been ejected into space over millions of years. The theory gains complexity with allegations that space agencies have detected artificial satellites of unknown origin in stable lunar orbits. These objects, supposedly between 50 to 200 meters in diameter, maintain positions that keep them hidden from ground-based observation while remaining visible to certain military telescopes. Some researchers examine historical accounts of abnormal tidal patterns and claim these indicate periods when Earth's gravitational field was influenced by multiple lunar masses. They point to unusually high tide records from the 13th and 14th centuries as potential evidence of temporary additional moons. The implications extend beyond astronomy into archaeology, with theorists suggesting that ancient monuments and calendars were designed to track multiple lunar cycles simultaneously. Alchemical blood ghosts represent one of the most disturbing intersections between medieval chemistry and supernatural manipulation. These entities allegedly emerge when specific alchemical processes involving human blood go catastrophically wrong, trapping the donor's consciousness in a semi-corporeal state. The theory stems from manuscripts attributed to lesser-known alchemists of the 15th and 16th centuries, particularly the works of Johannes Mercator and Dame Elisabetta Nera. These texts describe experiments where practitioners would distill their own blood using mercury-based compounds and sulfur extracted from volcanic regions, believing this would create an elixir of enhanced spiritual awareness. According to these accounts, the process requires exactly 7 drops of the alchemist's blood, heated in a sealed glass vessel for 3 days and 3 nights, while reciting specific incantations in Latin. The blood supposedly transforms into a crystalline substance that glows with an inner light. The ghostly manifestation occurs when the practitioner dies before completing the final step of the process. Their life force becomes anchored to the crystallized blood, creating what witnesses describe as translucent figures that appear around laboratories and storage areas where these experiments took place. Modern believers point to unexplained phenomena in old European buildings that once housed alchemical workshops. Reports include sudden temperature drops, the smell of metallic substances with no apparent source, and brief glimpses of robed figures near areas where old chemical equipment was discovered. The Venetian Palazzo incident of 1987 allegedly documented one such manifestation when renovations uncovered a hidden laboratory. Workers reported tools moving on their own and a persistent red stain that would reappear despite repeated cleaning attempts. Some contemporary practitioners claim these entities can be communicated with using modified scrying techniques, though such contact supposedly requires protective measures involving iron filings and specific herbal preparations. The Bowling Green Massacre represents one of the most peculiar entries in modern political discourse, primarily because the event in question never actually happened. In February 2017, White House counselor Kellyanne Conway referenced this supposed massacre during a television interview to justify recent immigration policies. She claimed that 2 Iraqi refugees had carried out a massacre in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and that the mainstream media had completely ignored the story. The problem was immediate and glaring. No such massacre had ever occurred in Bowling Green. Local news outlets, national media, and even the Bowling Green Police Department quickly confirmed that no mass casualty event had taken place in their city. What actually happened involved 2 Iraqi nationals, Wad Ramadan Alwan and Mohanad Sharif Hamadi, who were arrested in Bowling Green in 2011. However, they were charged with attempting to send weapons and money to Al-Qaeda in Iraq, not with carrying out any kind of attack on American soil. No one was harmed, and calling it a massacre stretched the definition beyond any reasonable limit. The incident sparked immediate ridicule across social media platforms, with thousands of people posting tributes to the victims of this non-existent tragedy. The phrase became a shorthand for questioning the reliability of official statements and the concept of alternative facts. Some theorists suggest the reference was intentionally fabricated to test public reaction to false information, while others believe it was simply a case of misremembering or conflating different events. The rapid correction and widespread mockery demonstrated how quickly misinformation could be identified and debunked in the digital age. The Bowling Green Massacre entry serves as a reminder that not all conspiracy theories involve shadowy organizations or cover-ups. Sometimes the most discussed conspiracies emerge from simple human error amplified by the speed of modern media. Dahmer shapeshifting suggests that Jeffrey Dahmer was not entirely human, but rather something else wearing a human disguise. The theory emerged from scattered testimonies that painted Dahmer as more than just mentally disturbed. Prison guards reported his eyes would shift color during conversations, going from brown to an almost yellowish tint. Some described his pupils dilating and contracting independently of lighting changes. A former Milwaukee County jail guard claimed Dahmer's voice would layer on itself, as if multiple people were speaking through the same throat. The guard said it happened during a routine cell check in 1992, describing it as hearing an echo that came from inside rather than outside. Inmates who shared the prison with him told stories of seeing Dahmer move in ways that seemed to defy basic anatomy. One described watching him bend his fingers backward at impossible angles while eating. Another claimed Dahmer's neck would stretch several inches when he turned his head, then snap back into normal position. The shape-shifting theory draws from Native American skinwalker legends and reptilian conspiracy folklore, but focuses on subtle physical anomalies rather than dramatic transformations. Photographs of Dahmer taken throughout his trial show facial inconsistencies that fuel the theory. His bone structure appears to shift between images taken just days apart. His jawline seems to expand and contract. His ear positioning changes noticeably from one mugshot to another. Online communities have spent years analyzing these photos, measuring distances between facial features and documenting the variations. They point to his skull shape appearing to morph, his eye spacing widening and narrowing, and his overall facial proportions refusing to stay consistent. The theory suggests Dahmer's violent behavior stemmed not from human psychology, but from an inhuman entity struggling to maintain its disguise. His cannibalistic tendencies are interpreted as instinctual feeding rather than mental illness. Some versions claim the real Jeffrey Dahmer died in childhood, replaced by something that learned to mimic human behavior, but never perfected it. Kohung's flying car represents one of the earliest documented descriptions of aerial transportation, recorded by a Chinese scholar over 17 centuries ago. Kohung was a renowned alchemist and philosopher living during China's Jin dynasty around 320 AD. In his extensive writings on metallurgy, medicine, and what he called the pursuit of immortality, Kohung described a peculiar flying machine that he claimed to have witnessed firsthand. According to Kohung's detailed accounts, this aerial vehicle could carry a single passenger and was constructed using a combination of specially treated wood and unknown metallic components. He wrote that the machine produced a distinct humming sound during operation and could remain airborne for several hours at a time. The most intriguing aspect of Kohung's description involves his technical specifications. He noted that the craft required what he termed liquid fire as fuel, stored in sealed copper containers beneath the passenger compartment. The vehicle allegedly achieved flight through rotating blades mounted above the main body, a design remarkably similar to modern helicopter configurations. Kohung also documented specific flight patterns he observed, including the machine's ability to hover motionless in the air, ascend vertically, and travel in straight lines across considerable distances. He recorded that the mysterious pilot wore unusual clothing made from an unidentifiable silvery material and never spoke to ground observers. What makes Kohung's account particularly compelling is his reputation as a meticulous record keeper whose other writings on chemistry and metallurgy have proven remarkably accurate when tested by modern scientists. His detailed measurements and technical observations suggest first-hand experience rather than imaginative speculation. The flying car description appears in Kohung's larger work on alchemical practices, buried among hundreds of pages discussing more conventional topics, which supporters argue demonstrates authenticity rather than deliberate fabrication. Indian blue dogs refers to the bizarre phenomenon that emerged in Mumbai during 2017, when dozens of stray dogs began appearing with bright blue fur across the city's industrial areas. The dogs weren't born this way. Their distinctive coloring came from swimming in and drinking from the heavily polluted Kasadi River, which runs through Mumbai's industrial district. The water had turned a vivid blue due to untreated chemical waste being dumped directly into the waterway by local pharmaceutical companies. What makes this particularly concerning is how long the pollution went unaddressed. Local residents had been reporting the discolored water for years, but it took viral photos of neon blue dogs wandering the streets to finally grab international attention. The Maharashtra Pollution Control Board eventually traced the contamination to several pharmaceutical facilities that had been illegally disposing of industrial dyes and chemical byproducts. The dogs themselves became living proof of environmental negligence that authorities had been ignoring. Many of the affected animals later developed skin conditions and other health issues, though some managed to return to normal coloring after the pollution sources were supposedly shut down. The timing raises questions about what other environmental disasters might be happening in industrial areas worldwide, hidden from public view until something this visually striking forces acknowledgement. The blue dogs essentially became accidental whistleblowers in a system where corporate waste disposal often operates with minimal oversight. The incident also highlights how animals frequently serve as early warning systems for environmental contamination that affects entire communities. This entry refers to the theory that Elon Musk is involved in developing technology capable of mind control. The core of this theory centers around Neuralink, Musk's neurotechnology company aiming to implant brain chips that connect human thoughts directly to machines. While the stated purpose is to help people with disabilities regain mobility or communication, the more alarming claim is that it could evolve into a system for behavioral influence or direct cognitive manipulation. Neuralink's device, a small chip with ultra-thin wires, is designed to be surgically inserted into the brain by a robotic system. It records neural activity and can, in theory, send data back. Critics have pointed out that any system with read and write capability over the brain creates the potential for outside interference. One particular concern is its connection to wireless updates. Just like any smart device, the Neuralink implant could hypothetically be accessed remotely. If compromised, it might be used to feed thoughts, suppress emotion, or steer decisions, without the person being aware. In a presentation from the early 2020s, Musk openly spoke about using Neuralink for telepathy and achieving symbiosis with artificial intelligence. While that might sound like science fiction, his timeline for human trials, combined with the company's relatively light approach to transparency, has only fueled the speculation. There are echoes of past research projects like the Central Intelligence Agency's experiments during the Cold War, where electrodes and chemical methods were tested to manipulate behavior. Musk's technology, some say, is just a shinier version of that same goal. Of course, none of this has been proven, but the idea that a tech billionaire could be building the infrastructure to upload, or overwrite, thoughts is enough to give this theory some serious traction. Planned extinction, also known as triage, centers on the belief that global elites are systematically reducing human population through deliberate methods disguised as benevolent policies. In medical settings, triage refers to the process of determining treatment priority based on severity of condition and likelihood of survival. This conspiracy theory applies that same cold calculation to entire populations, suggesting certain groups are deemed expendable. The theory gained traction in the early 2010s when several high-profile billionaires made public statements about overpopulation concerns. Conspiracy theorists point to documents like the Georgia Guidestones, which called for maintaining global population under 500 million as evidence of a coordinated depopulation agenda. Believers claim the triage system categorizes people into three groups: the elite who orchestrate the plan, essential workers needed to maintain infrastructure, and what they term excess population, marked for elimination. They argue this classification explains disparities in healthcare access, environmental policies, and resource distribution. The conspiracy encompasses multiple alleged methods including engineered food shortages, pharmaceutical interventions, environmental manipulation, and economic policies designed to increase mortality rates among targeted demographics. Proponents cite statistical anomalies in death rates, declining birth rates in developed nations, and patterns in disaster response as supporting evidence. Specific locations like Denver International Airport, with its underground facilities and unusual artwork, are often cited as command centers for these operations. The airport's murals depicting death and rebirth particularly fuel these theories. Documents referencing population reduction goals from organizations like the World Economic Forum are interpreted as admission of these plans, though mainstream explanations focus on sustainable development rather than elimination programs. The theory suggests that modern crises serve as cover for accelerating these population control measures, with each global event providing opportunities to implement triage protocols while maintaining plausible deniability. The L-8 blimp crew vanishing remains one of World War II's most baffling disappearances. On August 16, 1942, a United States Navy surveillance blimp lifted off from Treasure Island near San Francisco with 2 crew members aboard. Ensign Charles Ellis Cram served as pilot while aviation radio man 2nd Class Ernest Dewey Cody handled communications and navigation. Their mission was routine submarine patrol along the Northern California coastline, watching for Japanese vessels that had been spotted in Pacific waters. The L-8 airship carried standard military equipment including depth charges, life rafts, and radio gear for a patrol expected to last several hours. What happened next defies explanation. The blimp returned to base that same afternoon, floating gently down to Earth completely intact. Every piece of equipment remained in place, the radio functioned perfectly, and fuel levels showed normal consumption for the flight duration. The life raft sat securely fastened inside the gondola alongside personal belongings of both crew members. But Cram and Cody had vanished without sending any distress signals or leaving behind clues about their fate. Military investigators found no signs of struggle, no blood, no damage to the aircraft's structure. The blimp's logbook contained normal operational entries right up until the crew disappeared. Even more puzzling, the aircraft had been flying at roughly 1,000 feet when witnesses last spotted it over the ocean, making any accidental fall virtually impossible to survive yet leaving no trace. Search and rescue teams combed hundreds of square miles of ocean and coastline for weeks. Neither crew member's body was ever recovered, nor were any personal effects found floating in the water. The official Navy investigation concluded with no definitive answers, classifying the incident as an unsolved mystery. Some researchers point to possible mechanical failure or medical emergency that somehow caused both men to fall from the aircraft simultaneously. Others suggest more exotic explanations involving experimental technology or deliberate disappearance. The complete absence of evidence in either direction has kept this case active in mystery circles for over 80 years. Pleroma refers to the ancient Gnostic concept of divine fullness, representing the perfect spiritual realm that exists beyond our material world. This term, meaning completeness or totality in Greek, describes a heavenly dimension populated by divine beings called eons, who emanate from the supreme unknowable God. According to Gnostic teachings, the Pleroma is the region of light where 30 divine entities exist in perfect harmony, contrasting sharply with the flawed material cosmos we inhabit. The Gnostics believed this realm was accessible through direct spiritual experience and represented an internal state of divine fullness that could be achieved in this lifetime. The conspiracy theory aspect emerges from how modern esoteric movements have appropriated this concept. Contemporary occultists and conspiracy theorists have woven Pleroma into narratives about ancient wisdom traditions and secret knowledge passed down through hidden lineages. They claim that mystery schools, secret societies, and esoteric orders have preserved the true understanding of this divine realm throughout history. Some conspiracy theorists suggest that powerful elites use Gnostic concepts like Pleroma in their occult practices, allegedly manipulating reality through hidden spiritual knowledge. These theories often intersect with beliefs about ancient astronauts, hidden masters, and shadowy organizations that supposedly control world events through esoteric means. Carl Jung incorporated Pleroma into his psychological framework, describing it as the undifferentiated totality from which all opposites arise. This psychological interpretation has further fueled modern conspiracy theories that blend ancient Gnostic concepts with contemporary ideas about consciousness manipulation and reality control. The theory suggests that understanding Pleroma represents forbidden knowledge that mainstream religions and institutions have suppressed, positioning it as the ultimate spiritual truth that only initiates can comprehend. Beringers' Lying Stones is said to be one of history's most elaborate academic pranks that spiraled completely out of control. In 1726, Johann Bartholomäus Adam Beringer, a respected German doctor and fossil enthusiast, published a book showcasing his remarkable fossil discoveries near Würzburg. These weren't ordinary fossils. Beringer claimed to have found stones bearing Hebrew inscriptions, images of the sun and moon with faces, and even depictions of birds in flight preserved in rock. He believed these discoveries would revolutionize natural philosophy and cement his legacy as a groundbreaking scientist. The specimens seemed impossibly detailed and diverse. Some stones showed spiders caught in their webs, others displayed flowers with intricate petals, and several featured text in Hebrew, Arabic, and Latin characters. Beringer interpreted these as divine messages literally written in stone by God's own hand. What makes this case particularly fascinating is the sheer scale of the deception. Two of Beringer's academic colleagues, J. Ignaz Roderick and Georg von Eckhart, had been systematically carving fake fossils and planting them in areas where Beringer regularly searched. They used a combination of sculpting techniques and chemical treatments to age the stones convincingly. The hoax unraveled when Beringer discovered a stone bearing his own name. Even then, he initially theorized that God was testing his faith rather than accepting he'd been fooled. When the truth finally emerged, Beringer had already spent his fortune attempting to buy back every copy of his published work. The aftermath destroyed Beringers' reputation and financial standing, while his tormentors faced minimal consequences. Some versions of the story claim Beringer died of shame, though historical records suggest he lived for several more years, quietly practicing medicine. These fabricated fossils became known as Lugenstein, literally meaning lying stones in German, and specimens still exist in museums today as reminders of academic rivalry taken too far. Xenofeminism presents itself as a radical feminist movement that goes far beyond traditional gender politics. This theoretical framework, developed by the collective known as Laboria Cubonics, advocates for using advanced technology to completely eliminate biological sex and traditional gender categories. The movement's central manifesto, published in 2015, outlines a vision where artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and biotechnology serve as tools to liberate humanity from what they call the tyranny of biology. Rather than working within existing social structures, xenofeminists propose accelerating technological development to transcend human limitations entirely. The collective takes its name from a fictional AI entity, suggesting their belief that artificial intelligence represents the future of feminist liberation. They argue that nature itself is a social construct that must be overcome through technological intervention. What makes this particularly intriguing is their connection to accelerationist philosophy, which promotes speeding up capitalist and technological processes to achieve revolutionary change. Xenofeminists claim that by embracing rather than resisting technological advancement, they can achieve gender abolition on a species level. The movement has gained traction in academic circles and tech communities, with supporters arguing that traditional feminist approaches are insufficient for addressing inequality in an increasingly digital world. They propose using everything from hormone therapy to artificial reproduction to reshape human biology according to their ideological framework. Critics point to the movement's ties to transhumanist organizations and Silicon Valley funding, questioning whether this represents genuine liberation or a corporate-backed attempt to normalize human experimentation under the guise of progressive politics. OJ's bag centers on a mysterious Louis Vuitton garment bag that disappeared during the most televised trial in American history. On June 13, 1994, the day after Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman were found deceased, O.J. Simpson returned from Chicago carrying this distinctive piece of luggage. The bag's significance lies not in what investigators found, but in what they never had the chance to search. Robert Kardashian, Simpson's longtime friend and newly reactivated attorney, was seen carrying the garment bag away from Simpson's Rockingham estate. Despite being a potential repository for evidence in a double homicide case, law enforcement never obtained a warrant to examine its contents. Legal experts point to a critical window where crucial evidence could have vanished. The prosecution theorized that Simpson had roughly 2 hours between the time of the crimes and his departure for Chicago to dispose of the murder weapon and bloodied clothing. Neither the knife nor the clothes Simpson wore that evening were ever recovered. Kardashian's decision to reactivate his law license just days before the trial raised eyebrows among legal observers. This move granted him attorney-client privilege, effectively shielding any communications with Simpson from scrutiny. The garment bag, last seen in Kardashian's possession, never surfaced again during the trial proceedings. The bag's disappearance becomes more intriguing when considering the prosecution's evidence gaps. Despite finding blood evidence at multiple locations, they could never produce the actual murder weapon or Simpson's clothing from that night. Some legal analysts suggest the bag may have contained these missing pieces of the puzzle. Kardashian himself remained notably silent about the bag's contents throughout the trial, and in subsequent years until his passing in 2003. Lake Okeechobee bones and Aucilla sinkhole represent two of Florida's most puzzling archaeological mysteries that suggest human presence in the Americas far earlier than conventional timelines allow. The Lake Okeechobee discovery began in 1910 when a surveyor working on Grassy Island found 50 human skeletons buried just inches beneath the sand. 8 years later, an extreme drought lowered the lake's water level and exposed hundreds more skeletal remains along the northern shores of Rita Island and Creamer Island. Over 1,000 ancient skeletal remains have now been recovered from a 30-mile stretch of Lake Okeechobee's southern shallows, concentrated between Creamer Island and Observation Island. Early settlers reported the bones were so numerous that during low water periods, the lake bottom looked like a pumpkin patch dotted with skulls. The age and origin of these remains continues to baffle researchers, as they predate any known historical catastrophe in the region by thousands of years. The Aucilla sinkhole, officially known as the Page-Ladson site, sits submerged beneath 30 feet of dark, tannic water in northern Florida's Aucilla River. Between 2012 and 2014, underwater archaeologists conducted 890 dives into this limestone sinkhole, uncovering stone tools and mastodon bones that radiocarbon dating placed at 14,550 years old. These artifacts paint a picture of hunter-gatherers butchering or scavenging mastodons beside what was then a small inland pond during the Ice Age. The discovery pushes back human presence in southeastern North America by 1,500 years before the accepted Clovis timeline, suggesting these early inhabitants coexisted with megafauna like mastodons, giant bison, and ground sloths for nearly 2,000 years. The implications challenge fundamental assumptions about when and how humans first populated the Americas. Yet many of the Lake Okeechobee bones have seemingly vanished into the vast storage facilities of the Smithsonian Institution, poorly cataloged and largely forgotten. Meanwhile, the Aucilla discoveries face resistance from archaeological establishments reluctant to overturn decades of accepted chronology. Both sites suggest Florida held thriving human populations far earlier than mainstream archaeology acknowledges, raising questions about what other evidence lies buried beneath the state's waters and peat bogs. Extreme haunted house attractions operate far beyond traditional Halloween scares, pushing participants through experiences that blur the line between entertainment and endurance testing. These establishments require participants to sign extensive waivers that can stretch over 40 pages, documenting everything from potential broken bones to psychological trauma. McCamey Manor stands as the most notorious example, operating locations in San Diego and Huntsville. Russ McCamey, the owner, claims no one has ever completed the full experience despite thousands of attempts. Participants undergo medical examinations, background checks, and must provide proof of insurance before entering. The attraction lasts anywhere from 4 to 8 hours, with some sessions reportedly extending much longer. What sets these venues apart from standard haunted houses is the use of physical contact, live animals, and psychological manipulation techniques borrowed from military interrogation training. Participants are buried alive, waterboarded, force-fed unknown substances, and subjected to extreme temperatures. Many emerge with visible injuries, missing hair, and lasting psychological effects. The conspiracy surrounding these attractions centers on their true purpose. Critics argue they serve as testing grounds for psychological warfare techniques, with government agencies studying participant reactions and breaking points. The extensive documentation required, including detailed medical histories and psychological profiles, raises questions about data collection and usage. Several former employees have reported that certain sessions are filmed and distributed through underground networks, though official channels deny any recordings exist. The legal immunity provided by participant waivers creates an environment where almost anything becomes permissible under the guise of consensual entertainment. Multiple investigations have been launched into these facilities, yet they continue operating despite numerous complaints and medical incidents. The pattern suggests protection from higher authorities who benefit from the research potential these extreme scenarios provide. Reddit Mostly Bots refers to the theory that a significant portion of Reddit's user base consists of automated accounts rather than real people. This conspiracy suggests that anywhere from 30 to 70% of active Reddit accounts are actually sophisticated bots designed to manipulate conversations, push agendas, and create the illusion of organic discussion. The theory gained traction when users began noticing identical comments appearing across multiple subreddits, often posted by accounts with suspiciously similar naming patterns. These accounts typically follow a formula of 2 random words followed by numbers, like Happy Tiger 4821 or Blue Winter 7439. What makes this particularly unsettling is how these bots don't just spam obvious advertisements, they engage in seemingly natural conversations, building up karma and credibility before deploying their real purpose. Bot detection researchers have identified several telltale signs of artificial accounts. Many bots repost popular content from months or years ago, banking on users not remembering the original posts. They copy successful comments from older threads and paste them into new discussions where they seem relevant. Some bots even steal entire comment chains, with multiple fake accounts recreating conversations verbatim to appear authentic. The dead internet theory intersects with this conspiracy, suggesting that most online interaction is now artificial. According to this framework, genuine human content has been steadily replaced by automated responses, creating echo chambers where bots primarily talk to other bots, while real users unknowingly participate in manufactured discussions. Corporate manipulation represents one driving force behind these bot networks. Companies allegedly use these accounts to promote products subtly, downvote negative reviews, and shape public opinion about their brands. Political actors supposedly employ similar tactics, using bot armies to amplify certain viewpoints and suppress others during election cycles and controversial events. The technical sophistication of modern bots makes detection increasingly difficult. Advanced systems use machine learning to generate human-like responses, vary their posting patterns to avoid detection algorithms, and even engage in small talk to build authentic-seeming post histories. Some bots are programmed to delete their old posts periodically, making their activity harder to trace. Reddit's own statistics become suspect under this theory. The platform reports hundreds of millions of monthly active users, but conspiracy theorists argue these numbers are artificially inflated by bot accounts. They point to the declining quality of discussions, the repetitive nature of many posts, and the suspicious voting patterns on certain content as evidence of artificial manipulation. The implications extend beyond simple spam. If large portions of online discourse are artificial, it fundamentally changes how we understand public opinion, viral content, and social movements. What appears to be grassroots enthusiasm might actually be carefully orchestrated campaigns designed to influence real human behavior and beliefs. The Dowling Construction Company's lost wrecking ball is one of the most physically impossible thefts in recorded history. On July 17, 1973, workers at a demolition site in Indianapolis left their 5-ton steel wrecking ball suspended from a crane 200 feet above the ground. When they returned the next morning, the massive sphere had completely vanished without a trace. To understand why this case baffles investigators, you need to grasp the sheer logistics involved. A 5-ton wrecking ball measures approximately 4 feet in diameter and represents solid forged steel worth thousands in scrap value. These demolition tools hang from heavy-duty cables specifically engineered to support their enormous weight during the violent swinging motions required to destroy buildings. The theft occurred at a boys' club demolition site on East Troy Avenue. Lauren Dowling, the company owner, told reporters he couldn't figure out what anyone would do with a 5-ton metal ball. Police found no tire tracks, no equipment marks, and heard no reports of heavy machinery operating during the night hours. The case gets stranger when you examine the conflicting details. Initial reports claimed the ball weighed 5 tons, but a correction published days later stated it was actually 4 tons. Some newspapers mentioned police suspected a tow truck might have been involved, though this detail disappeared from later coverage. What makes this theft truly extraordinary is the complete absence of evidence. Operating a crane to lower a wrecking ball requires significant noise and specialized knowledge. Moving a 4 to 5 ton object demands heavy equipment and multiple people. Yet somehow, thieves managed this elaborate heist in the middle of Indianapolis without anyone noticing. The ball never surfaced at scrapyards, despite metal recyclers being the most logical destination for stolen construction materials. No similar thefts occurred in the area, ruling out professional equipment thieves. The Dowling Construction Company had no financial troubles that might suggest insurance fraud. Decades later, the case remains completely unsolved. No leads, no arrests, no recovery of the missing wrecking ball. Some researchers have proposed increasingly exotic theories, including interdimensional displacement and time travel scenarios, though these seem more desperate than plausible. The mystery endures because it represents something that should be impossible, yet demonstrably happened.